Welcome to the Honoring the Mission series. I'm so glad you're here for this special binge drop. In this first episode, you'll hear from a true tactical entrepreneur, Jeff Kirkham. He's a decorated Green Beret veteran who's taken his tactical mindset and applied it to business. His story isn't just about starting a company, it's about creating a new market and finding success through relentless grit. You'll hear Jeff discuss how the skills he learned in the military, like adaptability and problem solving, are the exact same skills needed to thrive in business. After you've listened to Jeff's story, you're going to want to jump right ahead to the next episode with Eric Hadley. He talks about how to build a business with purpose by focusing on community and service. So let's get into it. Here's Jeff Kirkham. Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, your hosts, co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Now, Liberty Spenders are politically conservative or faith-based consumers. There are 76.5 million of them, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. If you want to learn more about this, you can get access to our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free.
Our guest today is Jeff Kirkham. He's the president of ReadyMan and the inventor of Rat's Tourniquet. He's retired Special Forces. He's an author, which we're definitely going to get into, and one of the original founders of Black Rifle Coffee Company. And if you've read our book, Liberty Spenders, we talk about them an awful lot. So we're excited to have Jeff on. Like we said before, he's a retired Green Beret with 28 years of service, including combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. In 2013, he co-launched Black Rifle Coffee Company with Evan Hafer, which went public in 2022 and has some really amazing coffee and a cool new energy drink, by the way. I keep seeing ads for that. He trained at Ranger School and Special Forces Drive School. Now his leadership shines in his work as co-founder of Mustang Medicine, which has led over 20 wellness retreats to support veterans and others through healing and dialogue. He's also a nurse with a master's in nursing, and he's studying to be a nurse practitioner, we learned. He brings empathy to every conversation. He's the inventor of the life-saving Rat's Tourniquet, holds over a dozen patents, and co-authored the best-selling Black Autumn series, which is now a hit Angel Studios show, Homestead, which I just saw was renewed for, I think they're now doing 2 seasons. So Jeff's done quite a few things. He's a master storyteller. We're excited to have you here with us, Jeff.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's always cool to be able to share with folks.
Yeah, I think it's crazy too. I and glad to have you on. We were saying shortly before we started that I was just originally introduced to Jeff as the co-founder only the co-founder of Black
like
Rifle Coffee Company. Which is a big deal.
The story.
It was a big deal in and of itself, only to find out that you also are an author, which we're going to get into these books at some point because I've read through. I'm almost all the way through the 3rd. So tell us how you tell us how all this kind of comes together in one human being. How did this journey happen?
You get asked that a lot, I bet.
I love to chase squirrels. That's how it happened. Like squirrel. It's like that cartoon with the little orc that sees a bird and he's like, bird, and he runs off. That pretty much sums up the story of my life. But it's hapstance. I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself with good people that are going places. They like to say, whoever they are likes to say that you're the sum total of the 5 people that you're around the most. And so I think at some point in my life, I heard that and I was like, well, I've got to surround myself with good people. And so it's kind of the same thing. You don't want your kids hanging out with the bad kids. You want them hanging out with the good kids because you want them to turn out being a good kid. And I always took that to heart. And so I just always surrounded myself with people that were as true blue as possible and that were going places and that were doing things that looked like it was going to be, in some cases, a rocket ride. And And then I'm a big believer in meshing together and building that team, because team dynamics are just, you can really accelerate growth on stuff. And so, and I've been kicked in the guts a few times too with stuff that didn't work out. And we just call those learning experiences and we move on. So yeah, I've been very blessed.
Well, and no short of, I'm sure, of learnings, both about surrounding yourself with, people who are going somewhere, I think, as you said, or definitely committed to something bigger than themselves. I mean, that's the military. And team dynamics, my gosh. I mean, what better place to even get any of those fundamentals than at a place that's training for the highest of stakes possible. So I can't even imagine the wisdom that you've gained through that whole process.
I mean, it's, you get kicked in the guts once in a while, but overwhelmingly, it's like, it's that old saying, right? Judge not, lest ye be judged yourself, right? And that's going in with the way that I interpret that is like, you're going into these relationships saying yes instead of saying no. And so it's always giving people the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't mean that you lose, it doesn't mean that you're a blind hippie that loves everybody and you lose your ability to differentiate, good from bad. It just means that everybody starts off with an even playing field until they prove it different. And so it's a much more pleasant, less stressful way to go through life. And so, so far it seems to have worked.
Well, I love that, because it's all about, you still have discernment. And you're leading into one of the first things we wanted to ask you, which I know you're so passionate about. And you've said this a couple of times now, you get hit in the guts a couple of times. So, I mean, obviously during your time in the military, having experienced tremendous challenges. And I know you've developed the mindset that life happens for you, not to you, which we subscribe to that as well. So I'd love for you to talk about this. Was there a defining moment that helped you kind of solidify that as a belief? Or what led you to draw that conclusion?
It's a progress, right? It's like what we like to tell people, and this sounds kind of cliche, is the destination is the journey, right? And so as a matter of fact, I was just speaking to a group yesterday, and there's a class that we developed that's called the Summit Statement. And what it is, it's a series of 9 questions that you write. And I actually incorporated what I learned from writing and using editing. And so you write out, you answer these 9 questions. What brings you happiness? What brings you joy? What brings you contentment? And the last one is, what's deeply important to you? And you end up with about, 30, 40 sentences in that. And then, what you do is then you go back and you edit that. And then you go back and you edit that again. So you're essentially your high school English teacher with a red marker marking all this stuff out. But at the end of the exercise, you find out with these things that are deeply important to you. And once you kind of go through that exercise, it can be very powerful for people. It was very powerful for me. When I tested it out on myself. And so all of a sudden you start realizing, it's like, wow, all of these times that I've just been punched in the nose in life, I realized that, they were happening for me, not to me. And kind of the example to that was, back in 1996 or 97, something in there, I was in phenomenal shape. I could move, like, with 50 pounds on my back, I could run for hours. I could travel 18 miles through the mountains on trails at a really high rate of speed. And so, I was in phenomenal shape, and I was trying out for something in the military. And, at the end of the tryout, I'm like, man, I got this. Well, it wasn't at the end, but, there was one of the parts where they start cutting people, and I'm like, I've got this. I've got this in the bag,
Mm-hmm.
I'm running the instructors into the ground. And, like, all of a sudden, they're like, hey, Kirkham. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, thanks, but no thanks. And it was one of those, like,
oh, wow.
What are you talking about? And so fast forward a couple of days later, my life, to put this into context, right? A couple months later, I'm standing on the side of a mountain, and I'm yelling at the sky. I'm mad at God and everybody. And the reality is I was mad at myself. And, I'm like, what are you doing to me? Cause I was going through just a wicked divorce. I lost everything. I was living in a garage. My dad's, like a room above my dad's garage. I'd just gotten off active duty before I ended up going back and doing other stuff. But, and my life was essentially, I had no money in the bank. I had nothing. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? And cause I'm grappling with my own identity, even at 26, 27 years old, I'm grappling with my own identity with, it's like, I'm a Green Beret. Why is this not, happening the way that everything else is supposed to happen? And now fast forward, right, 40 years to 30 years now to where I'm at. And I look at it and I go, thank goodness it turned out that way. Because the place that I wanted to go professionally at that time, I actually ended up there because I didn't get into this other stepping stone. And the divorce that I'd gone through ultimately led me to, the wife that I have now. We've been married 20 years. And
Congratulations.
About 3 weeks here. And we have 3 wonderful children. And and she is my, she's my wife. She's my peer. She's my best friend. And so all of a sudden, and that it's just life happens for you, but it's just a process that you have to go through to figure out where those lessons are. And then once you do, it's like Atlas dropping the stone off of his shoulders and saying, oh, okay, I get it. Thank goodness it happened that way.
There's something you said in the middle of that I wrote down. I always know I have a good interview if I'm taking notes while I'm doing it. But about how you were on the mountain, shouting into the sky, I guess, upset with God about what had happened or not happened, but you were really mad at yourself. And that kind of hit me, just as my personal experience, feeling at various times like I'm really upset at God, but I'm really mad at myself. The interesting, I think, thing to call out. I relate, I guess, is the point.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of our philosophies that we teach, and it goes into the book, right? Where before the show we were talking about these communities and these connected communities, and in life, right? We can't go it alone.
Right.
We need each other. It's in the human DNA. And the example I like to tell people is, how do we punish prisoners? We put them in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And we know if we leave prisoners in solitary confinement long enough, they will go into psychosis. It's not they might, it is they will go into psychosis. And in solitary confinement is so effective, it even works on the sociopaths. And so now if you put that together, then it's like, well, who are we surrounding ourselves with, right? To create that connected community that's there. And we like to call it an AVAR community, an authentic, vulnerable, accountable, and reciprocal community. That what that means is that I can be my true self, and I can rely on the people that are around me to not weaponize my vulnerabilities, meaning to make fun of it or make light of it or whatnot. But then there is also that trust that's there, that they can tell me my blind spots so that then I can improve, because we live on our own cognitive dissonance, right? That's a phenomena because it's a survival phenomena. But it takes that connected community to come in there and say, hey man, you should look over here, right? Because I can't see what's back here. I only know that's right here. And it takes that AVAR community, authentic, vulnerable, accountable, reciprocal, to do that. But AVAR starts, like what we were talking about, Kurt, AVAR starts with self, authentic, vulnerable, and accountable, with the mirror. And so that's where older, wiser Jeff can say, oh, really, when I was standing on the side of the mountain yelling at God, I wasn't yelling at God. I was yelling at myself, trying to figure out those those lessons that, were hidden to me for, it took years to figure that out. But ultimately now I can look back and say, oh my goodness, thank goodness that it happened that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. We often joke that, sometimes we're a little slow to pick up, I think, on the lessons God's trying to teach us. And Kurt will often say, like, yeah, man, I'm like deaf. So sometimes he's got to yell really loud and I have to have something happen over and then this for me to kind of get the message.
Mm-hmm.
And so I totally appreciate that, because it is vulnerability, or, what we talk about a lot is just surrendering, realizing we're not in control, and because, ooh, boy, do we like to be in control. But yeah, having that awareness and vulnerability to receive, to look at that for yourself and then receive feedback from other people is essential to growth.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When you've turned this into, perhaps, I mean, this is certainly an element that's contributing to these wellness retreats you're leading right now through Mustang Medicine. So I know when we first talked about it, I know you work with veterans and first responders, but also business leaders and others who are facing personal struggles. How did that come together, and how do you work with folks inside these retreats?
That's a great question. And it, like so many things that turn out to be significant in life, it was a total accident. And so, so we actually work with, it's personal wellness and development is the retreat that we do. And we get people that the demographic is people that just want to be better. So we get CEOs and sales teams and soccer moms, and we've had a SEAL and some Green Berets and just regular people that are like, hey, I heard about you and I just want to be better. I mean, we've had therapists that have come through that want to learn more about what it is that we're doing and our philosophy. And just the long and the short of what we do is it's an immersive retreat. So it's 3.5 days. Most of them are held at a really beautiful ranch. And then what we do is we help teach our philosophy, and the root of that philosophy is the connected communities, right? It's that you can't do it alone, but so many people are caught up in these toxic relationships that they're in, and they don't even realize that they're in them. They just think, well, that's the way that it is. And once you kind of define that, it doesn't mean that if somebody, like, sometimes family members can be toxic, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to cut them away and never talk to them again. What we teach is this thing called rings of relationships. And in the middle, we're just talking about Ava, which is self. And then you go out another ring and you get to your intimate relationships, which are Avar, and that's probably, 4 or 5 people. I mean, the equivalent I like to tell people is Jesus had 12, one of them that betrayed him. So set your expectations somewhere in there, And so
it's a good frame of reference.
because people want everybody to be their Avar community, and it's just it doesn't work that way. Yeah, you don't see eye to eye with people, you don't connect, and then in Black Autumn, the book, you'll notice that the Homestead is made up of about 150 to 200 people. Well, as those rings continue to go out, we follow Dunbar's number on that. And so I'm kind of meshing the book with the retreat together. Well, the retreat is that core portion where we help people to understand what it feels like to be in a community that's Avar, that's not going to weaponize your vulnerabilities. And there's no blaming, shaming, or complaining. We do some hard things, but you decide what the hard things are, like cold plunging and yoga and a sweat lodge. But people choose in and how much or how little that they want to do, because we want you to listen to you. And then, and it can be tremendously emotional for people that's there as well. And we see these big jumps. I myself, have experienced these big jumps, and then it's just identifying who these communities are. So if I'm having a rough day, we all have crummy days, crummy weeks sometime, right? It's knowing who I can go to, that I can open up and be vulnerable and say, hey, Kurt, I'm having a crappy day. And you say, well, tell me about it. And then I've got somebody that I can decompress with, that I can tell my troubles, and I never have to worry about that ever being dug up or used against me anytime in the future. And so really this works with best friends, and it works with marriages, and it works with family and kids, and it just translates over all of that. But if it's somebody that is not part of my connected community, then I know that I don't go in there expecting something that they can't give. And so there's probably members of your family that if you go in there and you tell them something that's vulnerable, it's probably going to be on the hotline of gossip that's then getting used, later on. They're not part of your AVAR community. It doesn't mean that you don't cut them away. It means you just don't overexpose them to stuff that is end up going to potentially hurt you later on in your life. And so that's the kind of the premise of what we teach at the retreat. And the reality is that's very much the way that the books, the physical, the psychological, and the emotional, as that moves through.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you're opening the door wide open for me to geek out about the books because we were sharing beforehand.
Warning.
Yes, and I made reference to it in our introduction. So I was introduced to Jeff as the co-founder of Black Rifle Coffee, which is significant enough in and of itself.
It's huge.
And we should probably return back to that topic. And then I Googled Jeff, and of course, you're a main character in your own book, which I know there's a story there. But you wrote this Black Autumn series, which I think you had said has sold over 1 million copies.
Yeah, the whole series. There's over 1 million that are out in circulation.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And then it became what was the Angel Studios. What is wrong with me here? Angel Studios movie, which Homestead, with Neil McDonough, and that's a nice third act, right? If Green Beret is act number 1, and then you have Black Rifle Coffee is act 2. Act 3 is we're going to write a best-selling book and have it turned into a movie. How did the writing piece get fit into all of this? It's also a giant series, so not something you did in a weekend either. So how did all this evolve?
Yeah, it's 9 books in the series, believe it or not. I mean, it's crazy. It all started where Jason and I wrote the series together, and it all started. Jason was asking me, he was like, hey, how do you, and he wasn't in the military. He wasn't a first responder. He's very accomplished outdoorsman. And he asked me, he's like, hey, how do you think the world could stumble? And I was like, I'll tell you how I think it could stumble.
I've thought about this.
It was a little opinionated back then. And I was like, look, I don't think it's going to be one big thing. That's not how empires fall. It's a whole bunch of little things that build up into catastrophe that happens. Right. And so, and then later on found out that that's called the Black Autumn, Black Swan event. And it was like, oh, okay. So when you read the book, that's why it's a whole bunch of little events that tie together into something that becomes cataclysmic. It's not just the one event, it's multiple events that happen. And then with that, what we found is when we were writing the book, we were trying to answer these questions of like, well, if this happened, then how would people react? And I'm a student of history. I love to read history. And I was like, well, let's just read history. If you want to know the future, look to the past. And so started going back and looking where different instances like this had happened. And it was like, how did people, and that's tribalism, right? So groups come together into tribes. And we saw this, probably the most recent memory is like the American Indians. Well, actually the most recent memory is the tribes in Afghanistan. Every little village out in East Jabib that we went to was about 150 to 200 people. That was men, women, and kids that were there. There's a reason for that. And we saw with the tribes in the Americas, like the Comanche and the Apache, once tribes built up to the point that there were about 200 people, they would usually split And then because of resources, but also on the psychological side, you can only keep track of about 150 people before you start losing that connectedness with whatnot, to remembering names, places. And remember, the tribes were self-regulating. So everybody had to pull their own weight. Everybody had to work, and so everybody had to contribute. And if you weren't contributing in the old days, what they would do is they would banish you, which was just a nice way of saying you got executed without somebody actually, swinging an axe. And so because you'd go out into the lonely, dreary world and by yourself, and as the lone wolf, you very, very rarely survived. Even Moses, right, wandered around in the wilderness until he found the shepherd's family that then they adopted him in, and and the rest is history. And so that is the premise of the book. And so that built up. And so when Jason and I were talking about it, we started putting this together. And funny enough, Black Autumn, it took us 3 years to finally write that. And so kind of more to the point. So when we finished writing it, well, the book was like almost 2,000 pages long. This was after multiple edits. And, and you become like super infatuated and emotionally connected to your characters. Well, all of the characters, when you're writing a fiction novel, you write what you know. So the characters are based off of a single person, or they're based off of a group of people. So to keep in, like, there's so many points of view in the book. It's almost like a Tom Clancy novel. Mm-hmm. Well, you'd never do that as a first-time author. We didn't know what we were doing, so that's why we did it. Total accident. Because it's hard to keep track of all these, and so you've got these regular names. So anyways, we wanted to go the traditional publishing route, and so we sent the manuscript into the publishing company, and they read it, and they're like, we love the book. It's a great story. We want to publish it. But you're not Stephen King writing The Stand. Nobody's going to buy the 2,000-page post-apocalyptic book. And so we're like, right. And they're like, you need to cut a bunch of this stuff out. And so we're like, okay. So we edited out a bunch of the stuff that later became the novellas. So there's Black Autumn, White Wasteland, and Blood Spring. And in the middle of those, are the novellas that are there: Travelers, Conquistadors, Last Air Force One, and so on. So we did that afterwards. So we sliced out a bunch of the stuff, then turned it into the publisher. They're like, we love it, and we're going to go to print. And we were like, well, wait, we've got to go back and change all the names, because it was still all of these names, me and Jason and everything. And the publisher was like, no, we're going to print. We don't have time for that. And so Jason and I were like, we looked at each other, and it was like, well, what do you think? And it was like, there's going to be like 100 people are going to read this thing, our friends. And so we were like, that's fine, just leave it. And so, and as like so many things in life, it was a total accident that now it's a movie and that stuff. So it was a total accident. Yeah, it was not an ego trip. It was trying to keep characters categorized and keep the point of views and perspectives consistent throughout the book.
Hey, business owners, did you know there's 76.5 million faith-based and conservative consumers that are looking to support brands that align with their values?
That's a $5 trillion opportunity, and if you're not tapping into it, you're leaving money on the table. Our new book, Liberty Spenders, is your ultimate guide to reaching this influential audience using conviction-driven marketing.
That's right. We break down real-world strategies that successful brands are using right now to connect with this audience authentically, build trust, and drive long-term business growth.
So if you're truly serious about standing out in today's crowded market, grab your copy today on Amazon or visit libertyspenders.com. And don't miss out on this revolutionary strategy called conviction-driven marketing. Well, at least in the movie, they changed the names. I think it's Jeff Erickson, is the character in the movie.
It threw you for a loop, didn't it? You're like, wait a minute, are you the same?
Yeah. Well, yes. When we got on the phone the first time, that was, I asked that almost like a funny question. Like, you can't possibly be the same guy who did the Green Beret stuff plus the Black Rifle Coffee. And then you you wrote this book that's now a movie. And it's, yeah, same guy. But I was fascinated by it.
Joke's on you.
I am, for those listening, by the time this comes out, maybe I'll be done. But I'm about halfway through the third book. And the thing that sort of I was just surprised at your thinking on, and maybe frightened by, was how quickly everything devolves in the story, right? So I don't think this is a spoiler, but the whole thing, the beginning starts with some nuclear warfare type occasions, but then, the whole book is basically 7 days, maybe 10 days.
It's like 17 days. Yeah.
The first one in Black Autumn. And so my mental picture has always been, if we ever had a crisis of this type in this country, I'd have plenty of time to kind of figure things out. I mean, I live in Indianapolis of all places, right? We're not on the top of some foreign country's attack list, right? There's no World Trade Center here. And I've got a couple places I could go, if I thought, well, I wanted to get into a more rural area, and I'd have time, we'd have time, we'd stock up on toilet paper and do whatever, and, but all these scenarios seem really plausible in Black Autumn, the idea that, people stop showing up for work and the power goes out and then you see people immediately realizing, I got a couple of days worth of food in my house. And the only other place after the grocery stores are emptied quickly, the only other place to go is other human beings, and things start getting really real, really quick. And I'd read this.
I mean, just look at what happens when people expect a storm and they think we might be out of power for a little bit and people raid or you're expecting snow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's entirely reasonable.
Well, I'm sitting here reading this. I'm like, this chapter is like 3 months worth of drama, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really just a day, and that's what, I mean, it was fascinating read. It was an entertaining novel, but all the time I'm thinking, could things really devolve so quickly in a post-apocalyptic scenario, or would it take time, or would people be more cooperative?
How fast did it take for Kabul to fall?
Mm.
It was days.
Yeah.
It was literally days. How fast did Saigon fall?
Mm-hmm.
It was days. Now, the people that were in tune could see things were leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
But once the ball started rolling, it fell really fast. Tehran, I mean, Iran is in the news right now. Mm-hmm. And if you look at when the embassy, if you're, those of us that are old enough to remember the Iran hostage event that took place when Jimmy Carter was president, and how fast did that happen? It was days. Yeah. The students went from rioting to they took over the embassy to then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're in charge. And off they went, and it was days. And then the blacklist came out and whatnot. So is it going to be some long detracted conflict like the Ukraine? Maybe, that certainly happens. But if you look at parts of Syria where ISIS was invading into Syria, those people that, that were grappling with that, the Yahtzee people and the Kurds that were dealing with the ISIS, like all of a sudden they woke up one day and there were murders in their midst, and there's not much they could do with it. So back to your original question, again, if we want to know what's going to happen in the future, all we need to do is look at the past, because human beings, I'm a firm believer, human beings just have not changed in thousands of years. We're psychologically and emotionally very, 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 very the same, very much the same. We like to think that we're higher consciousness and all of this. The reality is, we're pretty close to the way we were, 1,000 years ago. And so, and if you look at the past, societies can fall, they can topple very quickly.
Reading through it, well, on one hand, my brain wanted to reject the idea that all this was happening so fast. On the other hand, I thought, this all makes sense, right? I guess this is how I would behave, or how I could see a community behaving in a bad situation. But I'm also curious. So you got it. So it's published. You're expecting a couple hundred people to read it, and it starts picking up some steam. Was it kind of a slow thing where, a couple people bought it, must have shared it with their friends, and all of a sudden you started seeing more people purchasing it, or did something happen quickly? How did you notice that it was more than friends and family?
Well, we sold out within, I think it was 15 minutes the day that it was released. The entire stock of, it was several thousand books that we had printed, and it sold out, and we were like, oh crap. So we were catching up, and so we were gonna print off a whole bunch more books, and then for whatever reason, not as many books were printed. So it came back open, or it was available. I think it took them, it was like 10 days or something to get the books back in print. All of a sudden the books are ready. Those sold out in an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and then it was like, oh, well, I guess more than our friends
right.
are interested.
We need to keep this going, people.
Yeah.
We're going. Yeah. And I mean, and then Jason, the co-author, he loves to, to help market and stuff, and just getting the book out in front of people. And so he's been a tremendous powerhouse behind its continued success. And then, and then the Angel Studios and whatnot. I've got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, that was Jason, because I had, I've been in nursing school and psych, getting my psych masters and stuff for the last few years. And so, so I got to give that credit to Jason. But yeah, for whatever reason, the main thing that kept coming back to us was people saying your book is terrifying because that could actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, okay, well, the time
to
prepare is when times are good, not when they're bad. So
that's right.
Yeah. Well, did you guys end up getting approached by Angel Studios, or did Jason think, hey, this would be a good match made in heaven? Made in heaven? How'd that happen?
I think it was a bit of both. So Angel Studios is local to us here in Utah. They live like right down the road, and Angel is pushing to make a bigger footprint in the film industry, like family friendly movies, and so again, friends and family, and I think they were very open to local authors and local ideas, and Jason and those guys got together, and the rest is history, I guess. It's so yeah. I found out about it a little bit later, and it's like, hey, I think we're gonna team up with these guys and make a movie. And I was like, great, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
There you go. That's when you hinted before at being around people that you think might be I forget how you described it, like a rocket ship ride or something. I forget the exact words you used, but it's just funny. It's just even watching your expression of like, well, okay, that's great news. But I think it's an amazing little principle not to skip over, which is, the dynamic of partnerships and team. And you talked about that. And, and for people in any stage of life, or employee or business owners, it's such a critical component, because you need these different elements, right? You need the artist, you need the person who is the subject matter expert, who's passionate about the thing that you're doing, the product you're delivering, the service, or the creative. And you need all those different skill sets. So hats off to Jason. And I can't even imagine being you and getting that call or email or text and then responding with, okay.
Well, did you get to geek out and do some cool Hollywood stuff and get on set and watch them film it?
Yeah. And they did a phenomenal job picking the cast. So you hear the stories about pretentious actors and actresses and Hollywood and stuff. And so Bailey Chase is the guy that plays the Jeff character. And he's like one of the coolest guys ever. He's super mellow. He's like, if you ran into him on the street and didn't know who he was, you'd just think he was a cool dude. I mean, Neil was the same way. And like all of the guys that are the actors and actresses. They're just super cool. And we call each other once in a while. I talk to Bailey and he's like, hey, there's this scene coming up. What do I need to do to prepare? Should my mindset be? And he's totally open to ideas. And it's very cool. The production set is, the main production set when they were doing the movie was almost a little bit overwhelming. There is like so much going on behind the camera that you're not aware of until you see it. And you're like, what are all these people doing? And it's like some dude's holding the lights. And it's pretty amazing. But Angel they did a phenomenal job picking the actors and actresses, because they're just all super real people.
Yeah.
Well, we're big supporters, and I'm thankful that, you helped contribute right to the content that they're doing. We've talked to so many people who are in this, the entertainment industry, trying to get more, like you said, family-friendly content, faith-based content. It's just really exciting to watch that grow, and to see the success that they're having in their endeavors there.
Yeah. Well, and I think of all the kind of funny things about it, for me was, having read the books, and you end up making yourself a character in your own book. And in the book, you're a bit of an asshole. In the book, you're the guy who's always like, hey, we're probably going to have to kill some people. And I'm thinking, well, he wasn't trying to turn himself into a sympathetic hero figure in this book. And so
it was really important to us in the book that all of the characters were flawed.
Yeah.
That there were no superheroes, and that mistakes get made, based off of ego, based off of, people catastrophizing stuff, based off of denial that anything was even bad that was happening. We tried to capture that as much as possible, because the more that we dug into, like, what would we do? We just kept thinking of stuff as like, oh, what would you do about that? Well, what about that? Well, what about that? And well, we're going to run out of this, which means this trickle down effect is going to take place. And then all of a sudden it goes on and on and on. And so that with the book, it was like, look, everybody's flawed, welcome to being a human being, right? Nobody's perfect. And then the second part of that is you just flat out can't think of everything. Even if you have a big group of people, you just can't think of everything. And so that's where these little, hiccups and obstacles come up in the book, just simply because you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and you're trying to figure it out on the fly with all of these different personalities, under stress, lack of sleep, and it piles on. And that's where it's like, the more you learn and prepare now, the better off you're going to be when the stress hits, right? When the prefrontal cortex isn't working the way that it should, and it's back here in the limbic system, or the brainstem, where it's like the fight or flight, because you're fighting saber-toothed tigers. And then all of a sudden, if you've never figured this other stuff out, then it's going to be a really steep mountain to climb.
Yeah. Well, I give a thorough recommendation, because they're fascinating books. And to your point, it really makes you think, as somebody who thinks about, well, maybe we will have a bad situation in upcoming years, and this is how it could go down. So I found it really inspiring. But I think one of the things you've just mentioned, which is something you're very passionate about, is the idea of how to stay calm and how to regulate your nervous system under pressure, particularly in high stress situations. Of course, you imagine some of those in the book, but of course, you've experienced some in real life as a Green Beret, and it's something you work through in Mustang Medicine Retreat. So how do you teach people? How do you talk about that with people? How to regulate their nervous system under pressure?
Well, that's another great question, because that's a biggie that we do when we teach people about regulating their nervous system. And I like to equate it to when you go to the gym, you warm up, right? So especially as we get older in life, and we warm up. So we don't want to pull a hammy or something like that, and then all of a sudden we're crippled. So you learn this from the time you're in gym class, right? And so but nobody ever teaches you to warm up your nervous system. How do you warm up your brain? How do you warm up the emotional aspect of it? And there's nuances that exist in life that aren't as obvious, but if I bring them up, you'll go, oh yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things that we teach is some of these ways of being able to warm up your nervous system. And so that's kind of the story of Mustang Medicine. I had just finished nursing school. I just passed the NCLEX for my RN. And my buddy Hugh called me. And Hugh is an interesting guy. He's never a vet. He was never a first responder, but he trains wild Mustangs. So he'll take these huge, a wild Mustang, they are very big, dangerous animals. And if you are not on your best game, they will kill you. They'll kick you in the head and see you later. And so it's a really special breed of person that can handle these. And then he's got a couple of his Mustangs. My kids ride them. They're so unbelievably gentled is the term that they use. So Hugh called me and he was like, hey man, I've got this idea. I want to start a wellness retreat. And he's like, will you come down and teach a class? And I was like, and I just finished school, finished that portion of school. And I was like, yeah, because he's like, look, I want you to come down and teach a class that's entitled, the Wise Warrior Avoids the Battle. And so I was like, and that's actually is a saying from Confucius. And so, I was like, yeah, because I had wanted to do a self audit because I spent years and years and years and years in the war and, probably too many years. And so, like 8 years on the ground or something. And so, but I still had all my fingers and toes, most of my marbles. And so I was like, well, why, living in high stress situation like that, why am I, I'm relatively adjusted and stuff. I don't claim to have PTSD or anything like that. And so I'm very blessed. So I was like, I want to do a self audit. And so I started going through, and because I was fresh coming out of nursing school, I was fresh on the psychological aspect of it. And so I started looking at the neurochemicals, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol, and others, and how they play into your body and your behavior. And so I developed this class called the 3 Pillars of Resiliency, which is the physical, psychological, and emotional aspects. And taught that first retreat. And, and everybody was doing everything that was there. And it was so impactful that, I went home and I told my wife about it, and I was like, this was really cool. And I was like, I think we're going to do another one. And she was like, okay, cool. And, my wife was in the intelligence community for years and years and years. And then, she was actually chief operations officer at Black Rifle Coffee for, in the early days and whatnot. And so, she's definitely a high octane personality. And, so I was like, will let's see if we can go together as a couple. And she was like, okay. So she came there and she experienced it, and she was like, wow, this was, because you see these positive changes in people. And one of our big taglines is just 1 degree of change, right? Just change 1 degree. You don't have to make these huge 180s. You don't have to do it's like change one thing, change 1 degree. And if you get that, then change 1 degree more. And it was so meaningful that I was like, well, let's keep doing these. And so now we're coming up on, actually not this weekend, next weekend, we have one that we're putting together at a ranch here in Utah, or another ranch in Utah. Then that happens to be all first responders and vets that are going to that one. But it's just been so incredibly meaningful. And that's what prompted me. It was like, well, geez, it's all these papers and stuff that I'm reading anyway, so that I can get better at what I'm doing at the retreat. And so I got my master's in psychology, and my wife got her master's in psychology. And then I got my master's in my nursing. And then it was like, well, I'm going to keep the ball rolling, because on the physical side, if somebody's in pain, if you've got neck pain or back pain, or I don't care about the psychological, emotional. I want you to fix my pain. And so I was like, well, I'm going to, okay, how do I, mesh all of this stuff together? And, so it's like, well, I'm already a nurse practitioner seems like the obvious thing. That's why I'm wearing scrubs today, because I'm in my clinicals, and, nurse practitioner is the obvious jump. And so, and I've just been introduced to just incredible people that is just we do some non-traditional Western medicine, and as well as some traditional medicine, but just a bunch of folks that are super caring and intelligent and just want to try and figure out the right way to do things. And it just dovetails so well with what we're doing down at the retreat with people, because if somebody comes up and says, hey, my back hurts, based off of some of the stuff I've learned, it's like, well, maybe I can give you a little bit of relief so that you can put that a little bit on the back burner, so that you can lean in more on what it is that we're talking about here on the emotional side. So it's just been a tremendous journey for me, and just continuing to learn new stuff every day, and meet great people, and I'm very blessed. And here's my wife, supporting me all the way. Like when I was like, I'm going to go to nursing school, and she was like, okay, that sounds great. Well, fast forward, 5 years later, 6 years later, she, after being exposed to all this, was like, man. And so now she's a vet, and a former vet, former first responder, intelligence community. And so now she's in nursing school. She was like, I want to continue expanding what I'm doing too. And so, yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I love it.
Well, I think what's so, humbling and inspiring is I just love your mindset, continued growth. You're constantly looking for ways to add more value and to serve at a higher level. And so I just thank you for that. It's such a great example to set for other people, and a great story to share. And you're just continuing to push forward with these amazing things that you're offering. And so it's beautiful. I thank you for that, Jeff. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. That's very, very kind words.
Yeah. Well, I thought we'd now start our lightning round. So we like to ask all of our guests the same 3 questions at the end. And I think maybe we've been dancing around this one during the entire episode, but I'd love to ask you what kind of legacy you'd like to leave behind from your work in all these various areas, with Mustang medicine, with Black Rifle, in your nurse practitioner work. What's the legacy you'd like to own?
I think the legacy that I'd like to leave behind is like my grandkids, read stories about me and go, that's something that I want to emulate.
And then I think you're probably a man of many hobbies, but I always like to give people an invitation to talk about something that's captured their interest lately, but it's kind of off topic from what we've been discussing today. Is there something you've been obsessing about? Maybe it's a hobby, sports team, great book you read. What's got your mind lately?
I think the book that I'm reading right now was gosh, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was now. It was written by a rabbi, and but what he's done is he's a curator of content from Buddha to Confucius to everything. So it's not what you typically expect out of a rabbi, or even like a priest or anything. And it was interesting. He was the thing that grabbed me that on the book, he was, obviously he's a rabbi, so he's talking about the Old Testament and the Torah and some of it. And he goes, there's this part of where God is talking to Abram. Abram becomes Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Abram, leave your father's house and go forth. And it's kind of a famous saying, go forth, right? And then he's talking about it, and he goes, well, actually, if you look at the ancient translations of that, the true translation is, Abram, walk towards yourself. And so it grabbed me because that all ties into Avar, right? Because Avar, authentic, vulnerable, accountable, reciprocal, that connected community starts with self, which is being authentic, vulnerable, and accountable to myself. And so it was that portion of the book, and there's a lot more of the portions of that book that I was just like, oh my goodness. All right, I think we're on the right track. We're gonna keep going. It's in the military, we have this saying of be, know, do, and it's the traits of a leader, right? Be the leader that you'd want to follow, know the things that it takes to be a good leader, and then actually do them, right? And so the most impactful thing that we can do in this life is set the example. And so if I set the example, if I walk towards self and I set the example for others to emulate, right back what we were talking about with, my grandkids, my great grandkids and great great grandkids, then all of a sudden that's really, in the world, according to Jeff, one of the ways that we can really impact future generations there. So
I love that statement. The most impactful thing we can do in life is to set the example. I wrote that one down. That's a good call out for the episode. And then I just wanted to end, maybe it's with Mustang medicine, since I know that's something you're particularly passionate about now. But let's say somebody only listened to 60, 90 seconds of this episode. What should they know about Mustang medicine and the retreats that would make, so they would know, hey, I'm the kind of person who should come to this, and here's what I should expect to experience?
The kind of person is people that want to be better. We're not an intervention. So if somebody needs an intervention, then there's other people that are way better at that than we are. If it's people that want to be better, we're personal development and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be broken. Everybody has struggles, but that's the kind of person. And we've had everything from very successful CEOs to a guy that had, he'd been clean off of heroin for a couple of years, and everything in between. And everybody gets something out of that. So that's the kind of people, the demographic, male and female, doesn't matter, that we come to. And it is a very gentle experience. It is not Jeff the Green Beret telling you to be more of a man. Come on, do it. You can do it. We don't do that. Like the example I like to tell people is the cold plunge. By the rule of thumb, you're supposed to be up to your collarbone in water that's 50 degrees and for 3.5 minutes so that you can activate the brown fat, blah, 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 blah. We've had people, they can get in up to their knees, and that's all their nervous system can handle. And we tell them, that's you. You listen to you. Uh-huh. You know what's best for you. Learn to listen to yourself. In medicine, 80% of the diagnosis comes out of the patient's mouth. But we've got to use these things. Uh-huh. And so we get that 80%. So when people, if the cold plunge is only up to their knees, we tell them, that's okay. Listen to your body. Your cold plunge is just up to the knees today. And everybody gets something out of it. And it's a very gentle experience. But it's hard because, we don't dig into the deep recesses of self. Abram, walk towards yourself. Yeah. We rarely do that, right? But it's interesting that was a story that was written thousands of years ago, but it's as meaningful today as it was at the day that it was written.
Yeah. Well, that's good news about the cold plunge because I did an event once at a guy's house. He had one of those built into the ground. Mm. And So there's a bunch of people trying to have a contest for how long they could stay in a cold plunge. And I'm thinking that's a contest I don't want to win. So, but I really am so happy that you were joining us. I was struggling to not extend this to an hour and a half, 2 hours, because there were so many cool things I wanted to ask you about. We barely even got into Black Rifle Coffee, which is so on brand for us. We may have to invite you back to talk about that origin story. But I really appreciate you came to join us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's always nice to help spread the good word about living a positive life.
Anyone who wants to get in touch with Jeff to learn more, hit him up at www.readyman.com or www.mustangmedicine.com.
Yes. Thanks so much for giving of your time. And for those of you listening, thank you for your time and for tuning in. We hope you got value out of today's episode. If you want to learn more again about Liberty Spenders, you can get access to our book at libertyspenders.com/free. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Liberty Spenders podcast. If you're a business owner, we hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights on how to grow your business.
If you enjoyed the show, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us reach more entrepreneurs and leaders like you who are ready to make an impact.
And write something flattering, because I read them all. Don't forget to grab your copy of Liberty Spenders too, available now on Amazon and at libertyspenders.com. It's packed with proven strategies to help you reach the 76.5 million consumers who are looking for brands that share their values.
We'll see you next time as we continue exploring how to grow your business with purpose and conviction.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode and the one after that.